Need these salts? Got ammo! Here you go!
Thanks.
Booker, catch!
Great.
Catch!
Thanks.
Found some money. Here you go.
Got it.
Bioshock Infinite and The Last of Us are two of the best games of the year, and having loved both with very few issues when I first played them at release, I recently decided to play through each of these games again. Interestingly, both of these games place an emphasis on scavenging and looting as a pretty core design mechanic. Playing through these games a second time, it became clear to me that one of them implements looting mechanics very well, while the other not so well. In this video, I'm going to take a closer look at how the scavenging mechanics are implemented in each of these games, and examine why they feel so out of place in Bioshock Infinite, but seem to complement The Last of Us incredibly well. Looting has always been a pretty major component of the Bioshock series, and was really one of the few RPG elements present in the original Bioshock as a sort of holdover from Irrational's previous game, System Shock 2. In Bioshock Infinite, the looting works much the same way it did in the original Bioshock. Every defeated enemy can be looted for up to 3 items, which simply requires you to look at the dead body and press a button. In addition to dead bodies, you can also loot various containers, which are littered throughout the game world. The types of things you can find consist of one-time use consumables that replenish your health or salts, lockpicks, money, gear, audio logs, and of course ammunition. In The Last of Us, looting works somewhat similarly to Infinite, but there are some key differences. Everything you collect is in the world as opposed to a looting menu, and you also have access to an inventory screen, unlike Bioshock Infinite. This means you don't loot every body. If the enemy had something of use to you, it will be dropped on the ground after you defeat them. The things you'll be collecting in The Last of Us are crafting materials, melee weapons, upgrade parts, pills, and ammunition. Now that I've covered how these systems behave, let's look at the reasons why these mechanics work so much better in The Last of Us than they do in Bioshock Infinite.
Stay back.
Holy shit, Joel!
The biggest problem the scavenging creates in Infinite is a disconnect with the fantastic narrative and world building. Lots of people love to point at the combat of Bioshock Infinite as a major cause of narrative dissonance, but given Booker's past as a soldier and a Pinkerton agent, it makes perfect sense that he would only know how to solve problems with the barrel of a gun. The scavenging, however, makes no sense in the context of the game's fiction and only serves to break immersion. In both the original Bioshock and The Last of Us, the world is in ruins and society has fallen apart, so it makes sense to sift through the remnants for any potential supplies. Columbia, on the other hand, is still a functional city for the most part, so stopping to go through every container makes little sense fictionally. Exacerbating this issue is the lack of any coherent logic determining what items you find in what locations. This may not seem like a major issue, but things like this can really undermine the believability in what is otherwise an excellently realized world. The questions become, not only why would Booker search for supplies in a toilet or a garbage can, but why is there food or ammo in a toilet or a garbage can to begin with, and why on earth would Booker eat anything he found in there? It also doesn't help that oftentimes you will find things in containers that aren't even big enough to hold them, such as finding a box of cereal and a sandwich inside a container smaller than a typical cereal box. The Last of Us, on the other hand, doesn't suffer from any of these issues. For the most part, items are in places where they would logically be, and even when they aren't, the core idea of a world 20 years removed from an apocalypse can excuse it. Even if it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for a spiked baseball bat to be in a bedroom, it's easy to imagine survival situations that might result in someone leaving these items in odd places, giving these scenarios some believability. However, there is no thought process that can excuse a cup of coffee being in an unopened box of chocolates on a shelf in what is presumably a functional candy store in a populated city like Columbia. A big point in favor of The Last of Us is also the simple fact that the core narrative theme of the game, survival, ties into the very act of scavenging. Joel and Ellie are simply trying to survive, and finding supplies to create makeshift weapons or first aid kits feels like something you would actually be forced to do if you found yourself in a similar survival situation. On the other hand, if you were told you were going to be visiting an amazing floating city, would it ever occur to you that you'd be spending a significant amount of time rummaging around looking for new pants and eating apples out of the garbage? The simple fact is, the implementation of scavenging and looting mechanics enhance the narrative themes and world consistency of The Last of Us, while the similar mechanics in Bioshock Infinite serve only to undermine the narrative and world-building elements. Unfortunately for Bioshock Infinite, the problems with the looting mechanics don't end with the fiction, as it also disrupts the game's pacing while adding very little gameplay value. The biggest reason the scavenging disrupts the pacing is simply because of how much of it there is. The fact that every single dead body can be searched means you spend a few minutes after every battle running around the battlefield looting dead bodies. The majority of them will have nothing on them or only worthless things, but I found myself doing it anyway because I wasn't going to take the chance of missing something useful. A large number of the searchable containers are also empty, which only serves to waste more of your time and disrupt the game's pacing even further. It also means that every time you enter a shop or building, you immediately start looking for containers rather than simply absorbing the excellent art design and environmental storytelling. The pace of The Last of Us also has the potential to be negatively affected by the looting, but it is mitigated by a few key differences in the way these two games handle these elements. The biggest one of these differences is the fact that you don't have to search every single enemy. If the enemy had something useful, it drops on the ground when they die. This allows you to do a quick visual scan of the area once combat ends to see if anything dropped, as opposed to having to walk up to every single dead body and search them. It also helps that all the loot items are physical models in the world, which allows you to once again just visually scan rooms and buildings to see if there is anything of use. There are some containers, like drawers and cupboards, that you must open to search, but there are far less of them than in Bioshock Infinite, and even still, you visually look inside these containers rather than a loot menu, which adds to the immersion instead of breaking it. From a gameplay perspective, the scavenging in The Last of Us is a key component to the game, and more importantly, feels essential to the game's design. Crafting is a major element of the game, and the scarcity of materials, especially on higher difficulties, means finding these materials is vitally important. This gives meaning to your searching and makes it feel important, especially because everything you find is key to your survival. Every single item you pick up has a purpose, and even if it wasn't exactly what you needed at that very moment, it will help you in some way. In Infinite, the scavenging feels like a chore, and the vast majority of things you come across are entirely useless. So often I found myself being unable to pick up ammo or use consumables because my ammo was maxed out and my health and salts were full. It also doesn't help that even on the highest difficulty, the game isn't challenging, and there's virtually no death penalty. When you aren't feeling challenged and the items you find don't help you at all, it makes the whole process feel superfluous. Also, the fact that Elizabeth is constantly tossing you supplies compounds the feeling of pointlessness that pervades the looting. Ammo is entirely a non-issue, due to the fact that you can buy it from shops. Even worse, the 2-weapon limit means you'll more often than not be finding ammo for guns you don't even have with you, once again creating a feeling of pointlessness in the looting. Compare that to The Last of Us, where ammo is extremely scarce, making every time you find ammo feel significant.
That's all of them.
Both games also have a resource-based lock-picking mechanic, and once again, The Last of Us uses this feature with much greater success. In The Last of Us, you are forced to use shivs to pick locks. Shivs are arguably your most important crafting item, especially when clickers are involved, and they are created using the rarest material in the game. This means you have a genuine decision to make in regards to picking locks. You can gamble and open the lock in the hopes of finding some useful materials inside, or play it safe and hang on to your shiv. It's the type of tough decision you can imagine having to make in a stressful survival scenario like this. In Bioshock Infinite, the resources used to pick locks are simply lockpicks, and the only purpose they serve is to open locks.
Done.
There is no decision involved. You either open the lock or you don't. There would be some kind of gamble if lockpicks were rare and you could only open a handful of locked doors, but if you spend any amount of time scavenging, you will have more than enough lockpicks to open every locked door in the game. All this system serves to do is force you to waste more time searching every container if you want to open every lock. There's no skill involved and no tough decision to make. It basically just boils down to a decision between wasting time or missing some locked doors.
Rockets, watch out!
Cut! Keep firing!
Can't find anything!
Where is it?
So, there's a very detailed comparison of a single mechanic that both The Last of Us and Bioshock Infinite share. Don't take this to mean I think Bioshock Infinite is a bad game. Far from it. Both of these games are in my personal top 3 of games released this year. It's only because I think Bioshock Infinite is so great that the issues regarding the looting mechanics really stood out to me at all. What I take away from this is that Naughty Dog designed a system from the ground up for The Last of Us to serve the game, its story, world, and overall design. Irrational, on the other hand, simply stuck with a system that made sense and worked for past games in the series without really changing it to serve Bioshock Infinite in particular, which is in many ways a very different game from the original Bioshock.